How can you raise a child who is robust, resilient, and able to handle setbacks? Don't we all want children who can succeed in life, and if they mess up, if life is hard, they're able to get back on the horse again and try again? Like, we will all face challenges, that's no question about that. The difference is how we're able to cope and get through life challenges and different situations. I want my children to be able to not give up and to reframe and handle tough situations and difficult periods in life. And to do that, it all starts with being able to have control over your own thoughts. Because when we're able to consciously control the stories we tell ourselves, we are able to control the narrative in our lives instead of just being a passenger and a victim of our own story. We want to be in the driver's seat, right? We want both ourselves and our kids to be able to take the lead in their lives and redirect and reflect when things fall apart. But how do we do that? Do we tell our kids just to toughen up, to brush off the dust and get back in there? To ignore the sad or hard feelings and just keep going? No, I don't believe that's healthy. I believe in a middle way, and I believe in giving our kids tools so they can reframe thoughts that are appearing in their head. To teach our kids to be resilient and to handle rough moments, we need to teach them to have control over their own thoughts, to control the narrative. You have probably heard that thoughts affect your chemistry, and it might sound like woo-woo and super spiritual. And even though I'm very into all of that, this is actually none of that. This is biology, this is neuroscience. When we hear phrases like energy affects everything or your thoughts create your reality, we might think, oh my God, that is so unrealistic. But I really want to show you why this is important to understand and why it's actually true, and how it can completely change your life and your kids and even set them up for a much better future. Because when you think a thought, any thought, your brain releases chemistry based on the thought, like based on that exact thought. So if you think about something stressful, like having an argument or a really embarrassing moment, your body will actually start to produce like stress hormones based on your thought. So a thought has the ability to change your heart rate, your muscle tightness, and your state of your nervous system. So when we talk about thoughts affecting our energy, this is just biology, because it affects like what is produced in your body and affects how you end up feeling. Thoughts have the power to affect how you feel. It affects how you act, and it affects how you look at yourself and what stories you tell yourself about yourself. So your beliefs are not passive. And actually, there is so much more going on. Like, our thoughts over time can affect our immune function, stress regulation, and even gene expression. But this video is not going deep into that. That can be for another video. This video is about why it is so important to teach your kids the power of their own thoughts. I find it so important because kids, they don't just experience single events, but they're building their identity, an identity of all these subconscious patterns that will follow them into adulthood. And what do I mean by that? Like the patterns they're creating right now that will follow them into adulthood. So if a child repeatedly thinks, oh, I'm not good at this, or I'm always failing, or I make everyone angry, or any other negative thought, that thought becomes a neural pathway. And the more it is repeated, the stronger it becomes, because neurons that fire together, they wire together. And eventually that thought doesn't feel like just a thought anymore. It feels like the truth. And this is how identity forms, that it eventually becomes a personality. So now you can see how this can affect your whole life, right? Because if you go around and think, oh, I'm a person that makes everyone angry, that will actually really affect how you approach other people or how you like possibilities in life, right? If a child grows up feeling this internal thought that they're always failing, or if they're bad at learning new stuff, just imagine the consequences that will affect if they choose to try something new, maybe what kind of education they want to do, or maybe how they even approach making friends. It affects really, really everything in life. We want our children to grow up with the ability to think loving, supportive thoughts. It doesn't mean that they have to be overly positive or like toxic positivity is not what we're looking for. What we are looking for is the ability to choose a loving thought and reframe stories into something more helpful and empowering. So when we teach children to become aware of their thoughts and to actively choose thoughts and stories that are more loving towards themselves, we are not teaching them to suppress emotions. We are teaching them to interrupt a thought that is not serving them. We are teaching them to take control of their own narrative and to redirect and make choices that are better for them. And that is what I consider as resilience. But how do we explain that to a child? Because, a child will not understand what it means that our thoughts really dictate how we live our lives. No. We have to meet our children at their level because they're not able to comprehend what it means to control a narrative. But what we can do is to use allegories like stories, practical examples to show them what it means. And there are multiple ways to do this. For example, I have been telling my children that our thoughts are like stories or books that we read. And if there is a book that we don't like, or if we don't like the story, or if we don't like how it makes us feel, we can just put that book away and we can choose another book. We can choose to read a book, choose a story that makes us feel better, a book that we like better. And our thoughts are quite the same as a story. So if we have a thought that it's not really making us feel very good, we're allowed to choose a different thought, a thought that is more kind, or one that makes us feel good or better. Another really good example is something I know Dr. Joe Dispenza has talked about doing with his children when they were young. And he did this experiment with 3 seeds. So basically he planted 3 seeds with his kids. So one seed was like a control seed. They watered it normally, didn't do anything special with it. The second seed was the one they intentionally nurtured. So they kind of spoke kindly to it. They sent appreciation and loving thoughts toward that seed and gave it like really focused attention. The third seed was the one they directed frustration or all this negative emotion towards. So if they were angry someday, they could go up to that seed and kind of like give all the bad and negative energy to that seed. And a really interesting thing was that, from what I know, he did this multiple times, and he said that the seeds developed differently. So the nurtured seed thrived more, it grew fast and sprouted fastest, while the one exposed to negative emotion did not grow in the same way. It always got some maggots, or just like didn't sprout, or something got rotten. And it really showed the difference, that how they would speak to a different seed would actually affect how they would grow. So what does that show us? Well, living system responds to input they get, right? And children are living systems. I'm not comparing them to seeds, but I mean, if a seed can really be affected with the energy, just think how this can affect children. We know from science that our environment can affect gene expression. So I think this really shows in a beautiful way how our thoughts can affect our bodies, and how a repeated state, whether we are negative or positive, really makes a difference. Elevated good emotions feels and really act differently in a body compared to survival emotions or negative emotions. And repeated emotion condition an outcome. More importantly, it does show that it makes a difference in how you speak to yourself and what kind of energy you pour toward yourself. We are not powerless inside of our minds, and we can actively choose a more loving thought and a more loving action. And by doing that, we can actively shift our state, like our internal state. Because identity and personality is not something that is fixed, but something that is actually practiced. I think this is a great starting point of a conversation with your child, and you can ask them, look at this seed. If something living and as simple as a seed responds differently to how this is treated, and to the energy that it's been surrounded by. What do you think happens inside your body when you treat yourself a certain way or when you say different kind of thoughts to yourself? This can help your children to understand that their inner dialogue, like what they're telling themselves, can affect how they show up in life. And of course, this is kind of abstract, so we have to show them in a more practical way by examples, by stories we tell. But we can also guide them into more loving thoughts in daily situations. For example, if you have a child that is trying something new or trying to do some homework and they're not really able to do it, and maybe they say, oh, I will never be good at this, or I'm really stupid, I will never understand this, we can guide them into reframing that thought into a more loving thought or a more supportive thought that is leading to more growth and expansion. So we could say something like, okay, I can see that you find this hard, but I know that you are capable of learning it because I have seen you learn hard stuff before. Maybe there is another way you could approach this, because that reframes that they're not stupid and that they can approach a problem in a different way. Or we can ask, how does it really feel inside of you when you say, I'm stupid, I'm not able to do this? What does that thought do inside of your body? And then we could guide them again and say, maybe you could ask yourself a more loving thought. This is hard, but I know that I can do hard things because I've done them before. I'm still learning. Maybe I just need to try again or try it in a different way. So we're not denying that something is difficult. We're not denying that something is hard, but we can teach them mental flexibility and show them that you're not helpless inside of your own mind and you're able to choose what kind of thoughts you have. We cannot control every thought that appears, but we can choose which one we want to water and which one we want to nurture. And I think this example with the plants or with the seeds is a really powerful example, because it's a great starting point to show your kids how energy and how your thoughts can really affect your inner garden. I hope you liked today's video, and if you have any questions or if you're looking forward to other topics like this, just remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.